Yeah, it's coming. Always forget you have to double click. Double click. Yeah. I just did a quick one because I did all that and didn't have it started. All right. What a good evening. I mean, it fit perfect with this book that it's dark here and we do not get visitors. And somebody started banging on my door and then the doorbell rang and I about leaped out of my chair. It spooked me. It spooked me. And I'm over there I turned on the light and I'm peeking through the peephole to see who is banging on my door and I didn't even wait, I shouldn't have even opened it, but I thought it might have was our neighbor. It was hard to see. And so I opened the door and I'm not interested. And I shut the door. Solicitors soliciting at 9 o'clock at night in the dark when we're getting ready to start talking about a crime mystery. Yeah, the dogs were going crazy. I'm like, no, no. Hi, Star. How are you? So good to see you. Are you feeling better? I hope you are getting to feel better. But we'll just give it a minute or two and see if anybody else joins us, and then we'll kind of get going with our book, Just the Nicest Person by Christy Barrett. Um, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good. It is a Christian-based novel. Um, so I would definitely recommend it. I thought the story in general was really good. I thought it was suspenseful. Um, and it really kind of kept me guessing. So do you have any general thoughts, Regina, of what you liked about the book before we get into it? I thought so. I thought so. Like I said, the very first chapter, which we'll go into in a minute, I mean, it grabbed me right off the bat. Right off the bat, it almost brought up some childhood trauma of hearing scratching noises outside. Um, I have a story. Yes, yes. I have a little bit of a phobia of somebody looking in the window or being outside your window, from when I was a kid, and I still have that today. Like I said, that's why I leaped out of my chair when somebody's banging on my door. No, no, there shouldn't be. Like I said, my husband Brad, he's already in bed, sleeping. He's already went to bed, so otherwise he would have answered the door. Them colds, my mom had it and my son, and that there's one particular strain of that cold. It just hangs on and does not want to let go. Period. So, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight for Book Nook, and where we like to read suspense thrillers and detective books and a whole lot more. Um, we also have a Discord, Paley and Pages, which we will get dropped in the chat there if you're interested in um, joining that other server, our server, which is Paley and Pages. So we'd love to have you over there as well. So we're so glad to have everybody join us this evening. So we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, Regina, you need to talk a little bit more. Yeah, yeah, they're like, "Can't hear Regina." Well, she's not talking yet. She's not talking yet. Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. No, what you liked about the book, in particular, did you like the writing style? I kind of know this answer, but would you read this author again? Would you read another one of her books? Yes. 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 It kind of really kept you going back and forth, and but it worked. It all came together and it worked for sure. Well, let's go ahead and we'll just get into it. Just kind of a warning. Th- hmm. How about now? Yeah, I can hear you. I have muted you. Is that better? Mm. Yeah, I don't know why that's not coming through. Well, I know that's on Ninja, not on Discord. So you are, well, I know you're not because I can hear you. Mm. Yeah, no, you're good. Don't, you're good. You're good there. Hold on. Yeah, Regina's asking Bev if you were able to read, or Beth, if you were able to read the book. Yes, I know that. I get that, Vicky. I don't have that. I'm just checking her camera here. Yeah, no, it says she's got audio. Yeah, yeah. How about now? Ah, technology. You've got to love it. Yeah, it took you 2 days. I read it in 2 days. So I read it pretty fast myself, which I was surprised. Yeah, nope, you're good. You're good. So everybody just know Regina is with us, and I will just relay what she's saying because I really don't know why I've got her on my OBS. She's got volume. Yeah, that's just on Ninja. That's not with OBS or Discord. Yeah, I don't know why that is. But anyways, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So we read this month Just the Nicest Person by Christy Barrett. And it starts out kind of like really intense. So in the first few chapters, we kind of learned who some of the characters are and a little bit of the story that none of them are really sharing with each other because there's so much suspicion going on in the story. So when which I was saying just a minute ago, just the first chapter alone caught me right off the bat because it starts with a podcaster whose name is Craig Rogers, and he's into mystery and cold cases, and so he lives way out in the wilderness in Alaska, in outside this remote town, and he likes to solve cold cases. So he's live on his podcast, and he's getting ready to disclose the name of a killer from a cold case in the community, and her name is Harriet. Uh, I wrote those names down. Um, but her name is Harriet, and so it's this cold case, this unsolved cold case, and he's live on his podcast, and he starts hearing like scratchy noise outside or footsteps in the middle of his podcast, and so he's kind of starting to get nervous, and that intensity, it just keeps kind of building, and then his broadcast is cut off, and so all of the people in this community that who like to listen to his podcast, all of a sudden that he's gone, and in the outside, out in the community, there's just this raging winter storm going on, so they don't know, is it the storm, is it the power? They don't really know what happened to cut off his podcast just right as he was getting ready to reveal the murderer. Yes, Regina says it's creepy, creepy, and so it just really kind of gets you right off the bat, and then you move into to meeting the other main characters, which is a man, and his name is um, Duke McAllister. He's introduced, and he is in Alaska in that area because his fiance had went missing several years ago, and so he still did not want to give up hope and hoping that he could find her, and so he went and got a job as a tour guide in this small community out in Alaska doing tours, and so that's kind of why he's there. And then we meet the other character, and her name is Andy Slade. And she's a disgraced attorney from Texas. And she's kind of working, she took a job as an ice road trucker in the community because she's trying to find out about the death of her friend. From this big scandal that happened in Texas, and it's all linked to why she's a disgraced attorney, and so she went undercover to kind of see if she could uh, get the truth about what happened to her friend. That wasn't an accidental death. She's pretty sure it was a murder by this gentleman named Vance. And so they are all kind of thrown together. Andy ends up, she's in this blizzard, and she's listening to the podcast, and the podcast shuts off, and she sees a figure standing out in the middle of this blizzarding 20 below snowstorm, and she ends up jackknifing her semi. And of course, Duke in Alaska. Yes, Regina, in Alaska. And so she ends up jackknifing her semi, and Duke, who's on giving a tour with a couple youngsters. One is a podcaster or a YouTube star, and her brother. They come up behind this wrecked semi, and he gets out to help her, and that's just kind of how they're all thrown together. Yes, yes, they're all just thrown together, which that's yes, Regina. Regina just said all of a sudden there is a gunshot out of nowhere, and somebody, at first he gets out and he's helping her, like trying to dig through the snow to look through for this person that she thinks she might have hit with her truck, and so they're looking and they can't find anybody, and he's wondering what she's doing out there by herself, and she's wondering who he is. Is he sent by this man Vincent from Texas, that she thinks is out to kill her because she's trying to uncover what had happened to her friend. And he finally convinces her to get in the vehicle and go to this trading post to wait out the storm because the roads are closed. It's impassable. And so as she's getting in the car, somebody starts shooting at them. And so they're trying to get out of there in a hurry so that they don't get shot. So, who's this person shooting at him? Does it have something to do with her past? Is it the person who murdered the podcaster, which they don't know yet that he's been murdered or not because his podcast just ended. So, and they don't know any of that. But here's this figure and out in the middle of nowhere shooting at them. And then you got Duke, whose wife's been missing, with a lot of other missing women from the area over the years. So you've got like three different intense stories of who it possibly could have been in standing out in the snow. Um, yes, yes, Regina. The Regina says the back window gets shot out of his vehicle, and so they're all really scared. These two young um, teenagers, young adults, I would say more or less, that he's in charge of as this tour guide. Um, they're freaking out, and they don't know what's going on, and there's just kind of like all of this suspicion is going on, and so finally Duke ends up saying, we've got to get out of this storm. We got to find a safe haven, and he takes them to this little outpost. That's this little small community where they can kind of wait out this storm and kind of see what's happening. And so they're kind of trying to get to know each other, and like I said, there's just all this suspicion going on, and it just intensifies when they get to the outpost. The outpost is ran by a woman named Simi, um, and so she's got her own secrets that she's kind of hiding, that she doesn't want to disclose. And so, it's like everybody's looking at everybody and wondering if there's a killer kind of amongst them because they just really don't know. Yes, yes. And Regina just said that in this beginning part of the book, Simi is familiar with both Duke and with Andy. She knows them both because they both, over the course of doing their jobs, have stopped in at ever different times and have had a friendship with Simi. But they never ran into each other. They didn't know each other, but they know her. And so she reveals the fact that she actually knows Craig, and she's very concerned about him because his broadcast had just suddenly ended. And they're um and then she discloses that she thinks Craig is her father. And so both Duke and Andy are like, man, you've never mentioned that ever. How do you know him? You know where he lives. So because of that fact, Duke and Andy decide to try and drive to Craig's home to see what happened. Did the power go out? Did he just lose the internet? Simi's concerned because Craig had mentioned he was worried that this killer was going to come kill him if he disclosed the name that he had found through his research on who had murdered this Harriet from this cold case. Um, Hello, hello. Hi, Echo. Look at that. I even did an echo for you. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty that I can't seem to figure out. Everything is working. Shows it's working, but Virgin, oh my goodness, Regina, not Virginia, Regina, does not have any sound coming through, and I'm not quite sure why, even though it says she does. You're not getting that. So I will just make sure that I let you all know what she is saying. Um, and so back onto back onto the book. So yes, yes, Regina says they borrowed, they're taking Duke's car or SUV, and they're heading out to this small cabin, and they're really not sure what they're going to find. And when they get there, it's pretty obvious what they found. They found him, Craig, the podcaster, he was murdered. And but what they didn't know was the murderer was standing in the woods watching all of this. And yes, he's watching. And they don't know he's watching, but he is still there and he is watching. And as they're kind of talking and looking at the scene and trying to, kind of like, oh my gosh, this is a crime scene. Do we notice anything? This Craig had bobbleheads. He had this bobblehead collection. And so Andy actually notices that there's several of his bobbleheads missing. And then so it's kind of going back between what the killer's thinking and he's hiding in the woods and watching him as to what Andy and Duke are doing in the home trying to kind of figure out what's going on, and they call the police. But like I said, there's this raging storm going on, and so the sheriff's department is shorthanded and they have no idea when somebody's going to be able to get there. But they did call and report that they had found him stabbed to death, and which was curious in itself because the woman Harriet, the cold case, she was stabbed 5 times, and the podcaster was stabbed 5 times. So in their minds, they're pretty sure it is the killer of the cold case and that they've got a serial killer on the loose. I know Regina, you're watching the chat, so that'll be helpful. Yes, 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 yes. So far, a lot of suspicion, a lot of, who done it, as they're kind of learning these things, and they still have to tell this Simi that this Craig was murdered. So you've got that, and the people back at the trade post. But while they're in looking and waiting for the police, they start hearing something that sounds like footsteps. And so Duke, he runs out the door because by this time, when they hear it a second time, they're pretty sure it's this murderer had stuck around. They realize that they're in danger. And he rushes outside, and the murderer actually stole his vehicle and tries to run him down. And then he disappears into the storm. So they're stuck in the storm now at the podcaster's house with his body and no vehicle waiting on the police to show up. What did you think about that, Regina, that part of the book? Yes, yes. Regina says when the after the officer gets there and starts this investigation, they find out that they remembered the podcaster actually has a snow machine, a snow cap machine, and so they get permission to take that snow machine and get back to the trading post. And so as they're going in back in, they come across or they get a report saying that another trooper had found Duke's SUV. And so they actually pull up alongside the SUV. The troopers there, the lights are going, all of this stuff, and they get out and the trooper's missing. And one of these bobbleheads is in the trooper's car with a note. Because like I said, this murderer is he is crazy. He is yes, he's singing um old time religious songs, and he's doing chants in his head from Old Testament scripture about being washed in the blood, and that he's got to, in his mind, he has to do these things to be redeemed. And and that's why he's doing those. So now we've got a storm, stranded travelers, a dead podcaster, and a missing state trooper because the trooper is now missing, and they see some they get out and they see some tracks in the snow, and which they're and they see some blood, but the tracks are leading back to the outpost where they are all staying. Um, so they know now. They're like, "Oh man, we are in some serious, serious trouble." And like I said, the suspicion of, is this a townsperson? Is it one of the people in the staying in this trading post? Um, so yes, yes, and that's part of it. Regina says the Dalton Highway murders, and that's part of the reason why Duke is there and why he moved his life there, and he's doing this adventure tour guiding, is because he's there trying to find out what happened to his fiance. And these, what did you say, Dawson Highway murders, and missing women from that. Oh, I've got to back it up a second. When they were back at the house, um, they were looking around, and Andy finds a bracelet on the ground, by the couch, and she picks it up. Well, Duke just about loses it. And he's like, "Give that to me." Well, the bracelet is his missing fiance's. And so he's like, "How did that get in the house? Did the murderer have it? Did Craig have something to do with it? How did his fiance, I think she'd been missing for several years. And how did her bracelet end up in this dead podcaster's home? Now he did had met with Craig to tell him about the missing women and his missing fiance, and so he doesn't know if maybe Craig stumbled upon it um, in his investigation, because his next podcast series after he wrapped up the cold case with Harriet was going to be about these missing women on the highway, including this Celeste. So they don't know how any of that, but he is just like totally tripped out that his missing fiance's bracelet is in the podcaster's home. So that was just one more twist that they threw in to that. Yes, Harriet, that cold case was an ongoing cold case for 8 years. And just to give you a little backdrop on Harriet, she moved into that community with her husband back in the 70s, early 80s, I think. And it was kind of like, I don't want to say it wasn't like a cult, but it was a compound. So it was these like-minded people, and they moved there for this quiet life, and they started a church. And this church is was a real I don't know, Regina, how would you describe it? They're more Old Testament than New Testament. So, very strict. Um, Everybody had their duties, everybody contributed. Yes, yes, Regina. Regina says more Quaker, more of a Quaker life, a lifestyle. And when they end up finding her dead, and she was stabbed the 5 times, and so that cold case, this 8-year-old cold case, is what the podcaster had been working on. And getting ready to solve, because he knew for sure, he knew who the murderer was, and he was going to drop them names on there. He did leave a little clue at his home, though, which kind of throws you off track a little bit. That he left a note that says there's two of them, and so they're not quite sure what that means. Is there two murderers? Is there two people involved in this cover up of this cold case? So that was just an extra little twist that they had thrown in there. So once they're back at the outpost and they start a search for the missing trooper, the two kids whose names are, because I don't remember, Matthew and Marcella, and they're twins. And like I said, they're just kind of on their YouTube seeking. She's a makeup influencer, and she's trying to branch out into something new. So she's been live streaming everything. So not only are they dealing with all this, but you got this YouTube streamer that's wanting to stream all of this stuff. But they get together and they talk about what all that they've learned, and they decide to investigate together as a collective, because Matthew is into computers. He knows how to search stuff and investigate. You've got Duke, who is out of the military, and he's like a crime scene investigator in the military, but nobody knows that. And Andy is a district attorney, which she doesn't reveal either, that she has a strong law and investigation background as well. So they all get together and decide that they've got to finish what Craig started and figure out who um, murdered this woman from 8 years ago. So they start down and they make their murder board, and they start coming up with different ideas of how to start solving this crime, because they've got to solve that crime and know who that murderer is to know who murdered Craig, the podcaster. So quite intense, quite intense. Um, they do end. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah, they start checking off like the people there, because they're all looking at one another, and so they pretty much kind of clear um, themselves. Another community person. He's kind of like a mountain man. He does stumble in and is staying at the outpost to get out of the cold, and he's all scraggly looking. So now they're looking at him like, oh my gosh, is he here watching us? Is he the murderer, or is he here to help? He does turn out to be a help and a friend there with the things that he helps them do. Um, but so through their friendship of building with their little murder club, crime club there, everybody does start opening up, and so Duke eventually um, tells them about Celeste, his missing wife. Um, Andy still does not trust anybody, so because she's got this whole other worry that it's this Vincent from Texas there to murder her. And so she's still keeping really close to the vest of who she is. Nobody knows that she's got somebody after her as well, which just throws it into the intensity mix. Um, But when Duke shares his missing fiance, that's when he's, lets them know that that bracelet was hers. And is it connected to what's going on right now? Um, do you have any thoughts on the next part, Regina? Yes. In the church? So what Regina's talking about is, so they decide they need to investigate this. So they get out in the vehicle and they start because they want to go interview people. So they want to go and talk to um, the cold case uh, Harriet's son and get his opinion what happened. Where's the father? Father's no longer there. They want to go and investigate the church. um, and when they go up to the church, uh, they hear organ music and this old time singing going on. And they get in there. Well, it was the murderer, and he took off out the back. And so Duke chases him, and he's chasing him down through the snow and falls in a animal trap and is stuck down in this hole and just like buried in the snow. He is able to get out of there and get back, but and they didn't at that time. Like I said, it they knew it was the murderer, but they didn't get a glimpse of him. And then they see an old photograph there in the church, which leads them um, to a prospector and to interview some other people that were part of this church community, Quaker style type community, before it kind of disbanded. There's people still living there, still go to church, things like that, but it's not the original community from the 70s, 80s that had fallen away after this woman, Harriet, had been murdered. Yes, the piano guy. Yeah, he's the murderer. We just don't know who he is at the time. And so they're conducting their investigations and talking with people, and they meet back at the outpost um, to try and figure out what's going on. And things are happening to them as well at the outpost. Um, No, no, and you've got this 20 below blizzard freezing storm going on. They're out searching for a missing trooper. The power goes out, so they've all got to huddle in kind of this common area and to keep from freezing. Um, and then I think the generator blows up and catches on fire. I mean, there's just all these things going on to these people that are stuck in this outpost with no clue as to who a murderer is running around in their community. Yes, yes. So what Regina was saying is this fire, this explosion, these butane tanks exploded and caught on fire and almost took Duke out at that time, blowing him up. And so the murderer actually takes another shot at Duke and tries to kill him. Um, but Andy comes out and runs him off and actually saves him again from getting killed. So he fell in the animal trap and then he almost gets blown up by these propane tanks um exploding. So uh as they're continuing to investigate, and they start learning some leads, and and who the property is deeded to, and different things like that. And they actually go to the land office, and they talk to the landman there to see what deeds are. And he just gives them his story, um, of no, 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 this was filed. It was a prospector and should have went here. And he gives them, he lets them know, and that kind of leads them back to the neighbor of Harriet, of which was friends, of who possibly could have wanted this woman dead, who everybody says was kind of like a pillar of the community. She was super, super sweet, just a wonderful woman, and nobody could figure out why anybody would ever want to do her harm. Was that your kind of take on that, Regina? Oh, yes, 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 yes. I forgot about that. That was one of the twists in the story with talking to um the one negative thing they said about her, which was what Regina just reminded me was, is they thought she was having an affair. Was that with the prospector, the neighbor, or the old police chief, which was their neighbor? He lived next to them too, but he wouldn't give them any information. He wouldn't talk to them or anything about it. So even though, like I said, was this wonderful woman, it was never really said she was having an affair, but that kind of came to light as they were investigating this, that maybe she'd been seen talking with somebody behind the house, that wasn't her husband, and maybe that's what had happened to her, going against the rules set by this church. Oh, yes. So they give Regina saying that as well during this part of the story, when they're trying to learn about Harriet and what happened to her when she was murdered. She was murdered in her home, and her children were in the bedroom asleep. So it's like it had to have been somebody who knew her to be able to get into the home. There wasn't a break-in, there wasn't any of that. They just found her dead, and her son, that they interviewed as an adult, is the one that had found them. The father was just so distraught that he moved away. He didn't stay there after that. So there's a lot of going on. Like I said, if you haven't read the book, you should read the book, because it's definitely filled with a lot of suspense and thriller moments, and it's like, oh my gosh, who is it? There's such a long list. I really did not figure out who it was until the end. So Regina, I'll relay what you say, but I'm going to let you talk about the ending of the book. So we've got them doing their interviews, and they're starting to put the pieces together. Is that Thomas? Tom. Yeah, yeah, no. So, what Regina is saying is they get back to the outpost after they conducted all their interviews and want to go back and kind of put their information together. And there's another stranger, somebody that they don't know. They are at that outpost, and his name is Tom. Yes, they do know him, and Tom is the from the land office, and he's there. They really don't know why he would come there, but he has showed up at the land office, and he's just so friendly and so helpful. And yes, that he had came for provisions, to stock up at home, to be able to weather out this storm. Okay. Yes. And there was more suspicion because of Ranger, the one I told you, that was the kind of like the mountain man, it's just an outdoorsman. He kind of like disappears for a while. So did he have something to do with the propane explosions? It He does come down, and they're like, "How did you sleep through that?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was asleep." Well, he has something going on with him that when he goes into a really deep sleep, you can't wake him up. And so that is why he wasn't so much as disappeared or left. He was passed out sleeping and they couldn't wake him up. So just another, at least that's what he says. That he sleeps so deep. And I do know the young woman, um Morella, is that her name? She tries to go and wake him up because he's in there sleeping. So they did kind of confirm that he does have some kind of sleeping disorder, that he is sleeps very, very deep, and it's very hard for him to wake up. So now you got all these players of who it could possibly be. But like I said, they are starting to make the connections. Um, of who it is. Suspense, yes, yes, yes. Oh yeah, yes, yes. So when Tom, because he's at the trading post and he says he's there for supplies, and as Regina says, he turns to leave, but he doesn't leave. Does he lock the door? No, they can't lock the door. No, no, I think Duke fixed the lock on the door so they could lock the door. And then he turns around and tell me what he says again. You should have left this alone. And so at that point, they all know who the killer is. Yes. Yeah, and he says everybody talks, you should have left them alone, and that now they know that they are in this trading post with basically a serial killer. And it's the nicest person. It's the nicest person. It's the land guy. He was so nice in the community, longtime resident, always helpful, and and he's actually the murderer. And he starts talking about, with what it is, there's a deed to that property, and he has got to find the deed, uh to that property, that Harriet was living on. And he felt that was all, that God and everything wanted him to do that, that that the rules of the church and everything, and that's why he had ended up killing Harriet, then killing, uh, Craig the podcaster, because Craig had the deed. They can't find the deed, but they had found the deed. um yes. Yes. And so what had happened with this deed was he was using it to extort money from the neighbor, the sheriff. that would refuse to talk to them when they were around interviewing because he was part of it, not part of the murder, but he was being extorted for payment, and this deed proved who this property and stuff, who it had, what really owned it, and uh, so in his mind, through God and all of that, that he had to redeem himself and wipe the slate clean by murdering all these people to keep his secrets. Yes, yes, that's Regina's saying the reason why he murdered Henrietta is because he was in charge of writing up the deeds and stuff, and he had falsified that, and Henrietta had found out about it. And that is why he had murdered her from the cold case, the reason behind how come she got murdered in the beginning. And then you have Craig that got murdered because he discovered it. And he discovered the deed and the original deed. Thomas or Tom. Yeah, Tom is the murderer. He's not only runs the land office, but back in the 70s and 80s when they started this community, he was one of the elders of this church. And so he took it upon himself, that he's of a higher power or something, and that he is supposed to dole out punishment like they did in the Old Testament, and that that's what God would want him to do, and through his position as the elder in this church, this dude is he's whacked out. Believe me, he's a nut job. The stuff that he's doing, and he doesn't sing in old time hymns. Yes, yeah. Andy starts taunting him and agitating him. Um, to start to push a situation. Yes. 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 And that's what Regina is saying is Andy, she starts antagonizing him. And in his mind, he is the elder of this church, top authority, Old Testament style. Women do not have a voice. And he's getting so upset and angry because he wants Duke to put her in a place. She's supposed to be subservient. She's not supposed to be speaking. You speak when spoken to. He's the man. He's the head of this church, and he is the authority of everything. Yes. Yes. So now he's trying to backtrack and say none of that is true, and he's just trying to get out of there. So what's the breakdown of how they capture him? Yes. Yes. So yes. So Tom decides, he's starting to tell him what his plan is. And he has a detonator in his hand. So he has rigged this outpost with explosives. And so he tells them they got to put their phones away, put them down, huddle together. Um, Basically, in a nutshell, I'm sending you to meet your maker type of thing, in the name of the Lord type of deal. I'm dealing down this punishment for you guys interfering with this, and this is what I'm doing. How do they get the detonator away from him? Yes. 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 So now he's trying to gain a little bit of sympathy by telling Tom's telling Andy and Duke and the rest of Simi and the rest of them that he grew up in this strict religious household, and he was whipped and beaten by his mother, and the discipline, and that you have to have this discipline to be redeemed. Yes. Yes. Yes, Regina says that he ends up, as he's given his final, whatever you want to call it, to them, he goes to push the trigger, but it does not go off. Be- Yes, yes, and they get the door open. The sheriff is there, um, and unbeknownst to Tom, um, when you have Ranger, the old mountain man that's sound asleep in his bed and don't wake up, well, he wakes up and he hears what's going on. So he ends up sneaking out of the outpost, and he disarms the bomb and gets the sheriff's department in there to arrest this guy, and unbeknownst to him, but he actually ends up, the old scary mountain man that everybody was kind of pointing suspicion at in the beginning because of the way he looked and the way he lived his lifestyle. He actually saved them all. He got out there and disarmed everything so he couldn't blow the building. Yes. Yeah, the retired police chief, and that's where that note that came in. There's two, is because Craig had also found out that about the blackmailing, that Tom, who murdered Harriet, was also blackmailing the neighbor who at the time was the police chief at the time, and that's why he wouldn't talk to them when they tried to interview him. He wouldn't say anything to them because this Tom, he was afraid of him. He was the elder of the church, and he was being blackmailed by all of that. So that is why he had kept quiet as well. But an intense story, so much going on, lots of suspense, lots of twists and turns, lots of thriller. Um, uh, that you really need to read the book to get it all. When you add in the weather and tromping through the snow and people shooting at you and finding dead bodies and falling in animal traps and explosions and power outages and everything, it gets pretty intense. So once they got him apprehended, they do end up going back to, because Andy remembers something, and she goes something that Craig had said in his podcast, and they end up going back to his home. Yes, because they had watched it. She had seen it. It had caught her eye when they were watching some of his old podcasts, and they went back. It had to do with the bobbleheads, and so she went back. Um, they went back to the home, and part of his bobblehead collection is he had a jumble-sized Agatha Christie. Who played Agatha Christie? Um, Not Betty White. I don't know why that popped in my head. But anyways, he had this large-sized bobblehead, and he always said that it held all his secrets. And so they take the head off of this bobblehead, and they find the deed. He had hidden the deed inside this big um, bobblehead. And so there they had Yes, had stolen it from him, saying it was left to the church. That was what the scandal was. He forged the land deed to show that the church owned the property, and it didn't. Harriet's children and husband owned the property. And so yes. Yes, and then on the closing part, which I thought was just so sweet and endearing, is he had left Craig, the podcaster, had left a handwritten note to Simi saying how he loved coming in there on Mondays and talking to her, and that she was just everything that he expected, and that he loved her, and tells her in this note that he's her father. But he didn't get the opportunity. I think he wrote the note because he thought somebody, that he was going to get hurt or murdered, and so he wrote that note in case it happened, which it did, and so it was able to give closure to her. No, and he knew that she knew or had suspicions that he was her father, even though they hadn't discussed it yet. But he just really wrote her this heartfelt letter. Um, Almost makes you want to cry. And and signs it, love, Dad. That she was just perfect, and that the time that he got to spend with her, talking to her on those Monday afternoon lunches, that he would go in there and sit with her and get to know her, which was just such a sweet, sweet, sweet ending. But that's not the ending yet. So they got the murderer. They get all that. They're the lead into book two, which is the end of the chapter. They're all getting ready to go their way. The roads are open. Andy's semi gets hooked up to the wrecker. She's got to go meet the wrecker out there to get it. And they're going to kind of disband. Well, because of their friendships, they decided that they would continue with their cold case group, and continue to investigate cold cases. And so they kind of stick together as their friendship. Andy, she's trying to get back to her home because all of this was going on with Vincent, which was from Texas, and she missed she wanted a meeting that she basically wanted to spy on, so that she could have evidence against him to show that he had murdered her friend from Texas, and she didn't make it back there for that. So she still got that going on. You still have the Yes, and you still have the case of Celeste missing, and all the missing women of that. So, and who shot at her, at them, the group, in the snowstorm in the beginning of the book. They still don't know who fired that. I don't think it was Tom, because he liked to stab people, and they did find the tracker. So, Matthew, the twin brother, he had mentioned, "Are you sure they didn't put a tracker on your truck?" Well, when they got the the truck back, they did find out that a tracker had been placed, a location tracker had been placed on her truck. So somebody knew exactly where she was at when she was going to be there. But the final twist of the book, is they separate ways. Duke takes her back to her truck, and they part, and she doesn't want him to stay there. She says, "You just need to go. I don't need you to stay with me." And she goes and gets in her truck. And Duke doesn't want to leave, but he ends up leaving. And she's in her truck. Well, there's somebody in the sleeper. And it's this character by the name of Skeeter. I don't think we really mentioned him, but Skeeter is her truck boss's son. And he is a real piece of work. Um, He is not a good person. He's a bad person. And he attacks her in the truck, and she is stuck in the cab of that truck alone, being assaulted by this skeeter. And he hits her with a tase gun and incapacitates her. Well, as that's going on and Duke's driving away, he just gets this bad feeling and he's like, I can't do this. I can't leave this woman out here in the middle of nowhere with all these unknown answers of we don't know what's going on. And he turns around and he goes back, just as the skeeter is getting ready to assault her, and he ends up saving her. And so the book ends that she quits that job. She tells Duke basically what's going on with this Vincent and what's happening, and she knows she can't go back to work because the Skeeter is the boss's son. Does he know what's going on? Is this Skeeter part of these missing women from this other unknown cases that's been going on, disappearances and things? Is he a part of that? Did he do something to Celeste? And so you got all of that information that's upcoming in book 2 of this series, if it's something that you want to continue reading. I do know Regina is reading the second book. I have not started that yet. I'm sure I probably will because I did really enjoy the series. I hope all of you enjoyed listening to us babble on about this book. But just a great book, great author. If you like suspense and thrillers and Christian style writing, definitely Christy Barrett is definitely an author. Both myself and Regina feel that you would enjoy reading. So we want to thank you for joining us. Um, Please think about maybe joining Discord. That's where we host our book club on. You can drop book ideas. There's a little coffee shop channel to talk about books. There's also gaming on there as well. Um, so we do a lot of stuff on there. It's really fun. It's just a good hangout server. It's called Paleo Pages. So you are all invited to go check that out. If you haven't already, our other channel for me and Vicky is Grizzly Girl Games and Grub. Vicky puts some awesome cooking videos on there, as well as we live stream our gaming shenanigans on that channel. So that's a lot of fun too. So I hope you will also join us over there. So before we leave and wrap this up, I got one more thing to do. Is we need to pick next month's book. So if you want to be in the book selection process, like I said, you can get on Discord and drop your suggestions. There's a channel there. It's called Your Opinions Count. And so for the month, we'll gather different book selections, and then I put them on a wheel, and we are going to spin the wheel here. Where'd my wheel go? Spin the wheel for next book. Cancel. Where to go? Where to go? There we go. That's what happens when you click the wrong one. There it is. Okay. So we're going to spin the wheel, and so for next